Let's go to Denver. It has some of the same elements of the last question, but this is from JT Alexander. How do the Nuggets make a championship winning team around Jokic? To be specific, it's how do the Nuggets or anybody, not that he's going anywhere, but sort of what's the theory of a championship winning roster around Jokic? Um, this is a really difficult question, and there's almost no way to go at it without we have to start with the concession that even if some of the advanced metrics really love Jokic's defense, Raptor has always been high on him. Generally, he grades out pretty well defensively if you're just looking at the metrics. It's my opinion, and I think we have to concede for the purposes of this question that he just presents defensive challenges to a roster that so far have been that's the problem. And maybe not the problem. You could say health last year was the problem, but just generally speaking, it's very difficult to play a championship level defense with a center that is not a vertical shot blocking threat, that isn't the most laterally quick, even if he's smart, even if he has great hands, even if he does all this other stuff right. That's just the reality of it. And so, the issue then is, well, so what are you looking for? You need versatility, good defenders at the point of attack, because you're going to have to play some styles where, Jokic has to come up to the screen. He can't be in drop coverage. He's not Brook Lopez. That just doesn't work. He can't switch. So you're limited really in what you can do. So you have to have wings and guards that are able to really, in tandem with Jokic, just slow the initial point of attack action down. Like, you can't let the ball handler that, Jokic is kind of hedging out on, get rid of it quickly to somebody open. You definitely can't let him get around both of those defenders and just throw the whole defensive rotation into chaos. So, I mean, to that effect, Aaron Gordon and KCP are both like pretty good in that regard. Now, Bruce Brown is another one. Smart teams are going to, switch around and try to hunt more matchups where you're not attacking those guys. But that's kind of the starter there. I think that's your defensive issue. If you could add Draymond Green to the roster and suddenly you have a switchable guy that can defend the rim and do all this other stuff, great. Like, that's your solve. But there's one of him, and that's just, he's the solve. He or someone similar would be the solve anywhere. Aaron Gordon is kind of a decent, poor man's version of that. So that's the defensive struggle. I don't know how you do that. Offensively, I think Denver doesn't have any offensive questions. You put enough good shooting, a second side attacker, which is like, MPJ and peak Murray, you're set. I think offensively for any playoff series. I'm just trying to think let's look at the numbers. Maybe this will tell it. So essentially you have the Nuggets ranked right now defensively are 28th. I'm going to have to double check that. They're bottom 10. And for these purposes, what you need to know is that, and you've seen this stat come up several times over the years, the idea that you got to be a top 10 defense to win a title. So the Nuggets are way far away from that. I think maybe they're 15th actually, but they have the 28th, location-based effective field goal percentage. So here's the idea. Here's how you get around that if the Nuggets are going to win a title with a defense like this. The only teams to do it outside the top 10 in defensive efficiency since 1981 are the 95 Rockets, who are 12th, the 01 Lakers, who are 21st, and the 18 Warriors, who are 11th. Every single one of those teams was a defending champion that flipped a switch, that had the personnel, that had all that stuff. The Nuggets just aren't that team. So how do you build a championship defense around Jokic? I guess you have to win a title first somehow, and then the next year when they're ranked 15th or whatever it is, you can do it. We've said we weren't going to be doom and gloom about Dallas. It is kind of doom and gloom for Denver, because I don't personally believe that there's a way to build a defense around Jokic that can be top 10 and like a big value add against the best playoff offenses. I don't see it.
So I would disagree and think that, one, there's a chance they may have already done it. And I'd be curious to see what happens if this team is at full strength for more this season. Or, Kawhi had said this about his ACL injury, and there's been a lot of talk about Jamal Murray sort of waxing and waning this year. These are 2-year recoveries. Like, you miss a year and then you're working your way back, basically. And so maybe Jamal Murray is going to be better defensively, because he was always kind of an underrated hard-nosed defender by the time that you get to the playoffs. And the other thing is just because there's been the trickle down of Michael Porter Jr. being absent, some of your best lineups have been defensive juggernauts this year. And would it be easier to survive minutes, with the bench if you had Michael Porter Jr. to mix and match in, or maybe even, I guess the Bruce Brown bench stuff was kind of noisy. Um, I feel like Denver's main issue, I'm more concerned about their bench than their defense. And I don't want to belabor the point you made about the way that they defend. They finally tried some different things, it felt like, over the past few games, and they like worked out where it's like, hey, let's be, you're still kind of using Jokic the same way, but you're being more aggressive with size and length elsewhere. And maybe that's the recipe. And so that's why Christian Brown might be so valuable to them. It's what if you have Aaron Gordon and you have KCP and you have Bruce Brown. Those guys are the answers. Maybe it's, and again, this still means that you have to tailor your team to Jokic. Is it you need an Aaron Gordon and then like a Jeremy Grant in tandem with each other? Because then you're talking about like, you mentioned being able to guard up top and at the point of attack, but there's also just going to be points where Jokic gets beats or guys get by him or he is in drop. And so you need size, length, quickness behind him. And the way you use Aaron Gordon, it's not always going to be him. And so you're going to have to rely on these other guys. Michael Porter Jr. has shown the ability to do it in the past. I don't know that you could rely on him. And so the Nuggets are and remain my title pick. I don't change my title picks anyway. I don't know if they've built the championship defense yet. I do think they're closer to it than not. And it feels like, yeah, you could say, well, having one Jeremy Grant away, and I'm just spitball. I mean, Jeremy Grant back in Denver would be fantastic, but that type of a player, that's a more feasible get than, oh, you need another top 10 star on your team to do it. And so maybe it's just they've leaned too far into like the point of attack-ish defenders because Bruce Brown and even KCP, like, no, they're not small, but they're not huge. And so like someone who's an Aaron Gordon size, like someone else like that, which is why I've kind of wondered, he's not the answer, but like Zeke Naji is starting to play now, in large part because of the Jeff Green injury. And so it feels like if they need something, it's that type of a player. And yes, it'd be nice if it was OG Anunoby, but it doesn't need to be that good, or he doesn't need to be that good, is my point. And so that's just sort of where I'm at with the Nuggets.
Yeah, I think it's just so difficult because, as I say, you can't, I don't see a way to build a championship roster around Jokic. I also sort of feel like the roster they have right now is almost as good as you can do, with the exception of like, well, they don't have like Andrew Wiggins or, just Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, or like just someone to really put the clamps on another wing. Because without that, like the reality is just I just don't see a way to survive as a playoff defense when everybody finishes everything around the rim. And the Nuggets are pretty good at preventing rim frequency, but when I looked these stats up last night, opponents are shooting 71% at the rim. And that's like, Jokic isn't really the driver necessarily of that. Like, it's not just him. It does feel tactical. It does feel schematic. It does feel like, because of the way Denver has to play, when that first level is beaten, it's too easy to get clean looks at the rim. And like, that's the first thing a really good title worthy defense takes away. And if you can't even handle that, then yeah, like everyone's subject to the vagaries of a hot 3-point shooting night from another team, or, whatever else, foul drawing, that kind of thing. But if you can't defend the rim, and that's where the buckets are easiest to come by, that's just such a hill to climb. I hate to be so negative about it. But I just haven't seen anything that convinces me that without adding, like, just take your pick of some elite defensive piece, that Denver can get there. And that's like, this is with the offense that might just, they're second, I think, right now, that has like a ton of upside on top of being second. Like, you could just be one of the best offenses of all time. And I just don't know if that's enough. So sorry if that's too bleak for Denver fans.